Hi everybody, my name's Andrew and today I'm driving this TJ Jeep Wrangler. Aside from muscle cars, this is probably one of the most iconic vehicles to ever come out of North America. What started off as basic military transport has evolved into effectively something that all ages and demographics can appreciate, which is relatively affordable, easily livable off-roading capability that's also backed by an impressive aftermarket community. Since the discontinuation of the Jeep CJ series and the adoption of the Wrangler name in 1986, there have actually only been 4 generations of Wrangler in those almost 40 years. YJ, TJ, JK, and JL, this being a TJ, which was from 1996 to 2006. Upon its original introduction in 96, the TJ was initially popular from a visual standpoint because it harkened back to the more original Jeeps rather than the YJ, which featured squared-off headlights and a 6-slot grille rather than a 7-slot grille that we all know today. This is immediately recognizable as a Jeep, and as such was incredibly popular for that reason. Of course, this particular TJ has undergone some extensive body modifications, as you can see, including but not limited to the custom metal cloak fenders front and rear and rocker armor, as well as custom bumpers on both ends. The front end is mainly just devoted to supporting the giant worn winch, while the rear end is pretty much visually consumed by the giant 35-inch spare tire. As you can see, a full set of 35-inch mud terrains on black 15-inch wheels gives this Jeep the proper chunky off-road look that everyone craves. Underneath, the TJ was also the first Wrangler to feature a more modern coil spring suspension setup. This particular one, of course, has also been modified underneath and builds upon that suspension with a custom drive shaft, slip yoke eliminator, an air locker in the rear, a 4-inch lift, and of course the bigger wheels and tires that we discussed previously. The lift, of course, also being slightly necessary for those. From factory, the largest tires that you could get on a TJ were just 30 inches tall, which is still a good sized tire, but not big anymore by modern standards. The biggest you can get on a JL these days is 37s from factory. This being a sport trim level, the standard equipment list is not particularly long, although, to be fair, in 2001, there wasn't a whole lot of technology like we have today anyway. You do have cloth seats. Well, I guess the only alternative would really be vinyl or leather, which are better, so. What else do you have in here? You've got air conditioning. You've got a manually dimming mirror. And yeah, that's about it. The good news is that, as with the exterior of this thing, many components in here are easily upgradable, and relatively affordably so as well, including this aftermarket head unit, which has Apple CarPlay, which is an excellent addition, and of course the speaker system behind the camera that you can't see. That said though, several nice upgrades were available on the Sport model, one of which is cruise control, which this one does have as an option. And you could get the 30-inch tire package that I mentioned before, as well as a Dana 44 rear axle instead of the standard Dana 35. Fun fact, by the way, in the newer generations of Wrangler, the Sport actually became the base model rather than 1 or 2 steps up the ladder, but still to this day features, as standard, manually adjustable crank windows and a manual transmission. Under the hood, we discover that my tripod actually isn't tall enough to show you the engine of this Jeep, so I'll have to overlay some B-roll or something here. But most TJ Wranglers came standard with this 4-liter AMC-developed inline 6. Of course, 2 different naturally aspirated 4-cylinders were available on the base models over the years, but frankly, this inline 6 is already quite underpowered, so I don't even want to know what those would be like. Earlier models offered either a 3-speed automatic or a 5-speed manual transmission, as in this one. In 2003, they added a 4-speed auto, and in 2005, a 6-speed manual. The 0 to 60 time was originally quoted between 9 and 9.5 seconds, though with age and, of course, modifications, that seems a little optimistic now, I'll be honest. Also just over double digits is the fuel economy. The official EPA figure for this thing is 15 mpg combined as of their revisions a few years ago. But considering that I've been driving this thing all weekend and probably done about 400 miles in it now and used almost 2 full tanks of gas. I'd say that number is a little bit optimistic, but maybe that's just me. In fairness though, most people don't buy a 20-year-old Jeep to be a highway mile muncher. And frankly, most people aren't even insane enough to drive a properly built like this every single day as a daily driver. But if you decide to, once you get past the awful steering, it's honestly not that bad for what it is. Yes, it's quite loud on the highway, but as you can see, the engine and exhaust sound great around town. If it was a little bit warmer, I could show you how much it burbles in between shifts, but unfortunately I can't do that right this second. The shifter, speaking of shifts, the shifter is about the furthest thing you can get from a Miata. But honestly, it rewards lazy driving, and that's sometimes can be a nice thing. And this is also, oh, there's some burbles, and we just got cut off by a Sonata.
Yep. Also from Virginia.
Good, yeah. Anyway, this is also a fairly easy manual to drive. I mean, the clutch is so tall that it's virtually impossible to let off of it too soon. Like I said before, you just have to get used to the steering. You just have to get used to making a million little micro corrections, and you also really have to pay attention because most of the time you don't know which way you're going to go until you're already going it. With the roof off or even just the windows down, music blasting, and the excellent straight 6 exhaust note, this Wrangler is an incredibly fun vehicle to just cruise around in. Or, of course, if you prefer mountains or mud or any other type of road surface, if you prefer any of those things to getting your picture taken at every single stoplight, it is going to handle that with no problem as well. That's really what it's built for, but unfortunately most people don't actually take them off-road. So here we are. It can do both, that's the point. But seriously, I've never gotten so much attention, I don't think, in a non-sports car. And I must say, it is all just genuinely positive attention too. It's just people that, you know, give you thumbs up or take pictures of it. And of course there's the traditional Jeep wave. That is a real thing I've discovered. But you know, aside from the fun factor, there are a few pretty big reasons why the TJ Wrangler is still so popular 20-something years on. For the most part, certainly not the ride, I can tell you that. For the most part, it's proven itself to be pretty robust and reliable, and I need to get out of this lane too. Aside from the custom lifter tick that this one is equipped with, and whatever fluid, whatever oil we just found all over the bottom of the gas tank earlier, aside from those things, it's pretty reliable.
That's just how you know that there is still fluid in it.
Well, yes, exactly. That is a good point. But it came pretty well built from the factory, I'd say, and as we've discussed, aftermarket upgrades are super widely available and relatively affordable. And there's really nothing in here that you don't need. The simpleness, the lack of features is actually a benefit more than anything in this case. And in addition to the affordability of aftermarket parts, TJs as a whole are one of the more affordable generations of Wrangler. They have still held their value insanely well. The original MSRP of this one was under $20,000, and it is still worth over $10,000 with all the bits and everything on it. But compared to spending 40 grand for a base model brand new one, it's not a bad deal. Sure, it's undoubtedly flawed in a multitude of ways. And while the TJ Wrangler is probably not something I'd ever buy for myself, after driving it around for the weekend, I absolutely get it. I get why this thing is so popular. It's really not hard to see, but I've never really had this much experience with a Jeep, and now I have, and I like it. Ultimately, this is really all the Jeep most buyers ever need, whether they want to admit it or not. And with that, that's where I'm going to wrap this video up. So if you enjoyed it or found it informative in some way, consider giving a thumbs up, or consider subscribing for plenty more content to come. Thanks for watching, everybody.